Welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Sequel Q&A. My name's Doug. So the next sequel that we're going to be covering is a lot of fun for a few reasons. One, it's going to bring back our action sequel expert, Andrew Paris, for the first time in a long time. And if you're a wrestling fan and you're listening to this when this was supposed to come out in January 2024, Randy Orton, the star of 12 Rounds 2 Reloaded, is going to be going for the title at Royal Rumble, which is going to be a lot of fun. So, yeah, really, I cannot wait to have Andrew back, and I can't wait to talk about this movie because I love the first one. And for it, what a great interview. Man, one of my favorites that I've done because there was so many different topics that we covered that was not about film. And that's with composer Nathan Furst. You hear the name, you're like, oh, didn't you have somebody with that last name on last year? You're right. Griff Furst, his brother, was on. He's the actor. Nathan's the music, and it's cool to get to collab. They have a movie that just came out talking about wrestling that just came out not too long ago that they were able to collaborate on called Hidden Strike. Jackie Chan, John Cena. It's on Netflix. Check it out. Which is I can't wait to watch it. Ever since we talked, it's been on my list, but I've been so busy. Kids, man, I tell you. But yeah, so it's cool they've collabed on that and then some other sci-fi movies. So we talk about the whole sci-fi movie genre and how people can be pigeonholed into a genre. Then we also talked about his dad, legendary comedic actor Stephen Furst. You know him as Flounder from Animal House, St. Elsewhere, Dream Team. You name it, he's been in it. It's just such a legend. So, and Nathan's a little bit older than his brother, so he had some really cool stories about his dad, and it was really nice. It was really nice. And he remembered his time on sets, had a great story about being on the set of Seen Elsewhere, and then also a cool story about being on the set of Dream Team, underrated classic. But yeah, we talked about really how somebody goes about getting into this biz. In the beginning, Nathan wanted to act and he fell in love with music. Back to the Future changed his life from the score of that one. And yeah, we talked about his early days, how, he worked on Christmas Vacation, the sequel, but he was really, it was really just getting your foot in the door. That's the only way you can get into the business is to get your foot in the door. And then he hit it. Well, a big break for him when he was talking about Bionicle. He worked on that, and then that, went to be so many things after it. 6 or 7 different projects were involved with that. And it was just interesting to hear, again, I never knew about directors interviewing. I never thought about the composer interview. And just what he talked about was pretty wild that everybody, I'll let him tell it better, but it was not what I thought it would be, which was pretty interesting. And it was kind of like, I don't know, left a bad taste in my mouth, the way they do it. And then we talked about, the difference in working in different budgets. Like he had a great experience working on Need for Speed for a major studio with DreamWorks. This interview's a lot of fun. You know what? I always love when I'm asking questions and they're answering and telling stories, but there's a lot of conversation. Nathan loves film. Obviously, it's in his blood. He was in Animal House. He was in his mom's belly. She played the girl that sold the marbles to his dad in the movie. So it was just cool to really talk about just so many different aspects of the film world. When it comes to, composers and AI and how, the contracts and a lot of stuff that we covered. Great interview. I'm going to shut my yapper because I know I'm going on, but I'll put Nathan's IMDb also in the episode notes so you could, really just go and check out, all of his other credits and all the others. And I'm sure so many of you are going to be like, oh, I've watched that before. Because that's what I did. I was like, wow, man, 12 Rounds 2. That movie was awesome. So do me a favor, if you're new here, please subscribe. Follow us on all social media at Sequels Only. And if you go on YouTube, if you're a YouTuber, find us, subscribe. Try to get as many as we can because maybe they'll give us like a prize or something. I don't know. But without further ado, here is composer Nathan Furst. People asking about kids and siblings. That's not something I usually ask. And then afterwards I find out like, oh, that person's kid is in the show or that person's brother. But like we talked about so many of the beginnings for your brother and I never asked, and it never came up. So that's why when my buddy Jamie reached out to you, he didn't even put two and two together, like the last names. And of course, like with your father being, so are you the oldest?
I know, right? I am the oldest, barely.
Okay.
Only by numbers, though. I don't know, but only by numbers. By 3 years, I'm a few years older than him. But cool. Does that speak to as far as maturity or whatever? I don't know. I know if I'm really the older. Well, time will tell, I suppose.
Yeah, right. So you were more. So you were more of aware of like. I know he said his earliest memories were like being on set of going to like St. Elsewhere, but you were like more aware of who your dad was, right?
Yeah, I would say, our experiences are about the same. It's not like, I remember going to all these other things that he didn't because of some age difference. We have a lot of the same things. I might have a little bit more like of a stronger memory on certain things. Like we would, one of my favorite memories actually as a child is I have a memory of basically we would terrorize a St. Elsewhere set. So, it was a big, massive set that, from my memory, generally you could sort of walk the map of the hospital. In other words, the hallway was connected to, an operating room, which was, it was actually a flow through. And so they would be shooting in like one hospital room, and my brother and I would have found like wheelchairs and were racing them down the hallway where they're not shooting and just constantly interrupting the takes and all these other things. There's a great story that I'm going to go ahead and pin on Griff. Sorry, buddy. Where from our memory of my dad was in a scene, and my brother and I are off to the side of the camera, and I believe it was Howie Mandel offered whichever one of us was willing to go just walk right in and ruin the shot right now, he'll give us a 20. Right. And classic to our personality. So I'm just like, I'm not like, I wouldn't, oh my God, ruin the shot. I'm not going to, like, I'd be too scared to. From my memory, at least, my little brother Griff, at the time, he must be 5 or something, without even hesitation, swipes that 20, walks right into the shot. And the director has to go, cut, what's in, So I'm pretty sure that the First Boys were pretty infamous at some of the sets. No doubt. So, I have no doubt in my mind.
Yeah. So like, when was it the point when, like, how did you decide, hey, obviously you grew up with everything being in it, hanging out at sets, your dad, I'm sure, I don't know if he's doing like line reading at home, but I'm sure just being around him, you understand, the part of acting. Did you think about acting first, or was it you always were in love with music, or?
No, absolutely. I thought of acting first. Well, when I was really young, I mean, probably when I'm around 10 to becoming a teenager, 12, 13, 14, I would actually read lines with my dad. So if he had an audition or had an important scene, if he's on Babylon 5 or whatever, and for the most part, he doesn't need to be, he's not nervous about it or whatever, but maybe sometimes, he might have like a long monologue that like mattered, to him, So I would run lines with him. And then, my job was just to, obviously I wasn't like giving him acting notes, but it was really just to make sure he memorized the lines and then to feed him the ends. But that's we would do that a lot. But, so yeah, definitely when I was young, probably when I was 10, I did a few commercials actually.
Oh, no way. For what? Local stuff?
Yeah.
Cool.
It was local. I did a pizza commercial that was based out of Arizona when I was like 9 or 10. And then I did a TV, I was on like a TV pilot. I just really wanted to be an actor like that. I'm like 10 at the time. But then pretty quickly, I sort of migrated over to music. What was it? I guess there was something about, I did enjoy acting and I liked that process, but then I would go into the movie theaters and just, it would be the music that made me go like, oh, that's what made movies 3-dimensional. Yeah. So I think that was it, as soon as I saw, Back to the Future in the movie theater. And then I have a distinct memory of watching Danny Elfman's Batman in the theater. It's 1989 or whatever. So I'm 10, 11. And that changed it for me. So then it was just from that point on, from like 12, I would say it's like, okay, no, I knew I wanted to be a composer from the time I was 12, like specifically film scores, which is probably Probably weird, but I did. I don't know why.
No, you felt it. You felt
Mm.
emotion. You're right. Like there's sometimes you can watch a movie and like if there's a scary scene that comes out in a movie, you can close your eyes and you won't visually see it, but the music can still give you that feeling of like what's happening in the scene, like what's coming up before even a dialogue says it, or maybe even you see
Yeah.
something. The music can like get you ready for it in a way.
Yeah, if it does it right, it does it without getting you too ready for it, obviously. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, even from a technical, like everybody knows the bit of like if you're doing a horror movie, the music, you would want the music to actually fade out like 2 to 3 seconds, so you have silence for a few seconds
Hmm.
before your big, reveal or whatever. The music obviously plays a huge role in that. I mean, especially something like horror movies. If you look at, if you turn on a horror movie, for the first hour or so and just mute it, there's often not very much happening on the frame.
Yeah.
A lot of that is being told with sound and with music, whether
Yeah.
it's ambience or stings or the other things. And it can really guide it in a really interesting way. But I also came up with when movie scores were really big on themes in the 90s and stuff like that. You would walk away from a movie like wanting to hum the theme, which is
Yeah.
not as
Yeah.
much of a thing anymore, right? So I definitely was a fan of just sort of like the music almost being a part of the universe of the movie that you're building, and universe in a very isolated, in a very different way than one might mean it now. I don't mean universe as obviously like a Marvel movie, but like if you're
Yeah.
setting up Forrest Gump, if you're setting up any of these other movies, that has its own world. What does it feel like? What does it smell, sound like? All these other things, and the score is a huge part of that. I think in
No,
those kind of
totally.
movies.
No, I agree. And you
So
mentioned Danny Elfman. Danny Elfman's like one of those people, like when I would be like studying for school or masters, or if I just need to relax, I can just, and what's cool about him, you can listen to all of his soundtracks and they sound totally
yeah,
different. And I listened to an interview with him. He was on Marin not too long ago. And he's like, I kind of like that. He goes, I don't like to do the same projects back to back. I don't like to do like a comedy to a comedy. He's like, it has to be like totally different. So I like adjust my brain. And I was like, that was pretty interesting.
right. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree with that. I mean, I know I've gone periods of time where I was doing the exact same kind of thing back to back. And it definitely, for me at least, hinders sort of that creative coming at it fresh thing. Because
Yeah.
you start to just do sort of the same things. You just, well, I knew this worked on the other
Yeah.
thing, and you're on a schedule. So, as humans, we're inherently lazy, right? We're going to reach to
Yeah.
what we know will work, no matter how artisty we can be, how unique we want to be. So yeah,
Yeah.
so absolutely going from like an action movie to an animation thing, or going to something of that nature, where it's such a different vibe, can be it's also a lot of fun to do that,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
especially if you're an artist type, uh, there's a chance you might be somewhat neurodivergent, so you don't necessarily want to. There's a monotony that sets in, and
Yeah.
that we crave, that sort of looking at everything differently. So I absolutely would agree with that. I've enjoyed writing music that I didn't even enjoy necessarily writing. I've done stuff where I would write an orchestral score, and then for like a commercial or a small video game, someone asked me to do like some sort of super EDM-ish, at the time dubsteppy sort of vibe, right? And
Yeah.
it's like that's not necessarily my vibe, but it was a lot of fun because I'm not in that world anymore. I'm not in my classical world anymore. I was fiddling with synth knobs and stuff like that, which is so yeah, changing it up's great. It'd be
That's
amazing,
awesome. So what were your steps like from 12, Batman changed you. You said, this is what I want to do. What was like the steps, like schooling wise? Was it a lot of at home stuff, tinkering around on your own? Cause you have some credits that are pretty, if you're that age in 89, it's like 98. You have like your first credit doing this. That's so you're 1920.
Yeah, I was 20, 21. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because again, like by 12, I was pretty focused on it, and I left. I would ditch school a lot, frankly.
Yeah.
So including music classes, because I was so focused on being a film composer that certain theory classes that are specific to a time period that I don't plan on getting into, I would shove off or whatever, which in retrospect may not have been great. But at the time, being a teenager, I'm so focused. Like, no, I'm going to be exactly like Jason Howard. I'm going to be exactly like Alan. It was so focused. So I built my first studio from using like a cracked rip-off version of Cakewalk from an old, like a whatever they called it, an old PC, a 486 or something. Anyway, I'm starting to sound like an old man. So just from like a hack thing of Cakewalk, and I was just sitting there learning sequencing and just trying to figure it out. So I'd be in my bedroom at 15, 16, just trying to figure that kind of thing out. So it was very like my education is all self, and it's very hyper focused, for better or for worse. So there's definitely going to be holes in it. It's very much like what I wanted to do. So so around the time I graduated high school, I did a few months in college, and then I actually dropped out of college because I saw myself. I'm not a patient person, so I saw this like, okay, well, I'm not going to take 2 years of choral theory in order to get to orchestration, in order to, whatever it was. It didn't. I wanted to fast track it, so I dropped out and I started interning at like studios and with composers, and literally just shadowing them and like sitting behind them. And then when I was 20, I did a couple of like student films, but I also started ghostwriting some cartoons for a composer who was like super busy. He had like 10 cartoons or something at a time on Sony when they would do Saturday morning cartoons. This is the late 90s, 98, 99. And, in that time, I would imagine, I know it was a lot harder to be a guy who has 10 shows going at once, because the streamlined process of writing a score from a studio with samples was not what it is now, which is super straight ahead and easy. So he needed help, and he needed help fast. So I ended up ghostwriting on some of these shows, like the first version of, I guess there was only one version of like Starship Troopers and Dragon Tales and all these things that many people won't know. And then I got an opportunity to sort of co-compose, which was really, I was ghostwriting it, but I was getting credit on the show called Max Steel, which I think now has like gone through a couple different versions, but I'm talking like the super wonky version, like circa 2000, you know what I mean? And it's just this like the motion capture on it is like pretty silly. But it was a lot of fun. I had so much fun, and I was doing that show at 20, 21. And then shortly after that, I did this audition for these Bionicle movies. And then since then, I was able to just keep working. And that's from the age of, 20, 21.
That's awesome. I think one thing that's cool is you and your brother, obviously had the opportunity to work later, but I thought it was cool that both of you guys worked on you and your, I think he called him Uncle Stuart Penkin, when your dad and him would do those like sketch that it was for like a diabetes association, right?
Yes. Oh my God, I forgot about that. Oh my God. Yeah. So he would do this like diabetes awareness thing, and it was like a parody movie, and it's like they're doing it on a shoestring budget, and we're working with Stuart Penkin, and it's been a lot of so that's how it starts. Is we would work together, and Dad would bring us in, and I mean, to this day, my brother and I sort of work together.
That's cool.
It's so funny. I think people see a lot of that sort of the Nepo baby thing, but there's a flip side to that of just the comfort and the trust that comes from working with family. Like somebody just like, that they're gonna encourage you to succeed with your ideas. It's all these kind of things, and all that sort of a lot of the political stuff that happens in this town can sort of go away. So I definitely understand the appeal of like working with family, because it's one of the few ways you can have that really genuine of just like, let's make a show kind of an energy of just like, it's not about this, it's not about that, it's not about billing, it's not about budget, it's not about that, it's about how do we put on a show, and just the excitement of that. And it's always great when you can get back to that feeling.
No, that's
so
awesome.
We did that with that, and then I think my dad even directed one of those Sci-Fi Channel movies very early on, and I was the composer of that, and my brother was in it as well.
That's awesome.
Being directed by him. So it's like, it's just like, and it's just a lot of fun. And then now he's producing all these movies that are just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah,
And
the Billy Bob one
that he calls me.
Yeah, the Billy Bob one. Like, I thought that was wild. Just the ones that he did before,
I know,
because we were kind of talking about how hard it is to make that leap as an actor or even director to go from Sci-Fi Channel. It's almost like a taboo word. It's like, oh yeah, I was in the Sci-Fi Channel movie. It's like, all right, well, we can't have you in this A-list movie for the most part with some people. So when he said that he produced
100%.
that other movie, I was like, oh my God, that's a big 180. That was big for him.
Yeah, it's really great to see him sort of just like blow through and shine and get past some of those older credits. You know what I mean? Because that's the thing, is it's like, I guess there's two ways to look at it, and some people in this town have the benefit of like having independent wealth, whether it's from whether their parent was a movie star or something, or it's just like, oh, my parents, my family's in steel, and they want to be an artist. It could be really it can be challenging to do it with no money. So what you have to do is, like, sometimes it's just work is work. So you take the work you can get, and you can't always prioritize, well, what's the trajectory I want in 15 years? You can't always govern that way. It's just about, well, I need to do what I love to keep working and pay the bills. So especially 20 years ago and on, and maybe even 10 years ago, I would say that that's even more true. Like, if you were doing Sci-Fi Channel movies, or if you had that on your credit, like, dude, you ain't doing any big movies. You ain't doing any of that. But I think that's less so more and more now. Like, more and more I think more, because as this sort of gig culture, it's everywhere, essentially, of just like, yeah, you just do whatever you need to do. So I think there's a little bit less of that, thank God. There's a lot more opportunities floating around out there. It's a different kind of thing.
No, it's good. It's fair, because there's some actresses, like I talked to this one lady, Monique Parent. She was in a lot of those like Skinemax movies, but she wasn't like that part of the Skinemax. She was like kind of like just an actress in those, and maybe like her clothes fell off or something. But I feel bad for her because she does all these Sci-Fi Channel movies. Yeah, exactly. But she has to do auditions and now and use a fake name, because she got a gig on as a regular on like a CBS show, and then once they looked at her credits or something, somehow they found out like what she did in the 90s, because she put it off of there. So it's like this whole taboo thing. So when she goes on auditions now, like she was in like a Bieber video, like not in a big role, but she had to use a fake name because she got caught out on the other one. And I think I get it, but who's watching a show with their family and be like, hey, let me look at all that. What'd that lady do in 92?
No, I actually totally agree. I totally agree. And yeah, that's different than the Sci-Fi Channel thing or whatever. But yeah, if you were doing anything like that's softcore or whatever, then transitioning, it's almost like you can only transition as like a homage or like a parody of yourself, like almost like what Tracy Lords was doing for a minute back in the day, where she would show up in comedy movies as like, whatever, as herself or whatever. But no, I agree. It's kind of silly, and especially I forget whose name you just said, but
Monique Parent,
Monique Parent. I'm sorry, Monique. But if she's auditioning, especially for like Disney Channel or anything like that, she would have to totally. And they're deep over there, with all the morality clauses and contracts and stuff like that. And then I think more and more people are doing morality clauses these days too. So it's weird, man. It's weird. I don't agree with it either.
Yeah, because it's not fair to be like, it's like, hey, we need to hire someone. We need experience. Let's look at your experience. Oh, it's not the exact experience you want. So it's like this little like kind of game, because how hard is it to get your first job in exactly what historically should be your first job? It's difficult. Even, your credits, it's so cool with even yours too, looking up, and they just keep getting bigger and bigger. And then you did like Act of Valor, and there's like a bunch of bigger name movies on there.
Yeah. No, well, that was luckily I teamed up with a director and with some people with a company called Bandito Brothers. And the director Scott Waugh, and we had a great partnership going. We started with Dust to Glory, which actually that was very lucky on my part. So I auditioned for these and did these Bionicle cartoons, which was a trilogy that became this like massive sort of success, I guess, which was crazy. And then the lawyer for who was like working in post production on that suggested me to Scott Waugh and Dana Brown for this documentary called Dust to Glory, and it's like I don't know anything about it. I met with these guys; they were really cool, and we just had this really amazing interaction and relationship. That where they pushed it, man. They would show up to my studio at 2 a.m. sometimes, but that was actually one of those things where it just really felt like that dynamic really felt like what do we do to just make a show? What does it take to just make something as great as it can possibly be, no matter what that means, right? And I always loved that energy, and so we did that, and then we did actually some like Navy short films as like a test in the aughts, and then we ended up doing Act of Valor, which became this massive hit. And then the dream right after that is we ended up doing a movie called Need for Speed together, which ended up bombing, but the experience was amazing. It's the only, well, it's not the only, but it was just a remarkable, and the DreamWorks team was just so incredibly supportive. It's getting into this sort of A-list rung for a minute, right? And like you hear that, that's where the real trouble starts. That's where the execs start coming in and fighting you, and there's all these other problems, and there's so many people to appeal to, and all this kind of stuff. And with DreamWorks, I just found them to be so incredibly welcoming and kind. And they didn't have very many notes, but when they did, they were respectful but insistent. They want this thing, but they were very, just the way they went about things was just remarkable. It was just a dream experience, and I got to record at the Sony scoring stage there with like an orchestra. I met some of the coolest people who I absolutely cherish on that show. But yeah, man, just kept going up for a second. That was a good trajectory for a hot second.
Yeah, and that movie, I think
you do it while you can.
Yeah, totally. I think with some of those movies, I don't know what else came out around then, like video game wise, but sometimes you get like those trends of here's this gaming, or almost like when we were like I was younger than you, but like our age gap's not that different. But like in the early '90s, with like Street Fighter and like Mortal Kombat. Well, the first one was good, the second one was not good. But you're trying to like create a movie based on just like pictures of characters. There's no story already out there, so you're trying to build something. I don't even remember playing those Need for Speed games if there really was a story. I think they're just like racing. I think that's all man.
Yeah, you're just racing, so they were just building the story. And I don't want to overstep, but there was an earlier draft of the script that was definitely more video gamey.
Oh, really?
In that there were like certain gangs of things and stuff like that, and it was weird, but it developed over time into the movie it became, which wasn't, I think it is a better, may not be great, but it's a better movie than I think it gets credit for, honestly.
Yeah.
When it came out, this is what was weird. Oh man, this is weird. We were finishing it. And I think we were literally on the dub stage. We were finishing the mix of it when Paul Walker died from his car crash. He was racing a Porsche, and then somewhere in there, and I guess he was racing this car, and then it like barreled and caught on fire or something, right? As cars might do when they do that. So in Need for Speed, there's a scene where somebody's car gets crashed and it barrel rolls and catches on fire. And there was this news push that sort of like associated those two things as if the team from Need for Speed like watched the Paul Walker crash. Was like, oh, we should put that in our movie. Like, no, nobody was doing it. We were done. We were done with the movie. Like we were literally like fixing them, like putting the finishing touches on it. And I remember that created like some sort of weird like Fast and the Furious versus Need for Speed. Like it was one or the other thing. It was kind of one of these kind of interesting things. So maybe that contributed to it. I mean, I know a lot of people have a different take on like what caused, why it didn't do well. I'm sure your viewers there might be comments that be like, because it sucked. I don't know.
But then you got Aaron Paul, like when he was first getting hot. Yeah,
dude,
that's all
Aaron
that matters.
Paul is a phenomenal actor.
Yeah,
just an amazing actor. And I was beyond the moon when I found out he was going to do the lead, because I was already like a psychopath for Breaking Bad. And like what he was doing on Breaking Bad. My dad and I, my dad was the one who actually came to me initially when he was still alive, and he's like, I'm watching the show Breaking Bad, and I was like, yeah, I've heard about it. I'm about to start it. And he said, Aaron Paul is this fantastic actor. He's insane. He's amazing. And so like back in 07, 08, my dad was talking about Aaron Paul. So when I got the chance to work with him, it was fantastic. And
it's crazy that shows that from that long ago.
It is. I think it came out in '07, and then it ran for whatever it is, 6 seasons. Yeah, that's about right. Because then I think he finished Breaking Bad, and then literally like the first sort of like thing he was going to do was he ended up doing it for Speed. But yeah, and I met him a couple times, and he's a dreamy dude. Like I got lost in his eyes. It happens.
But that cast is good too. Like you got to think like Rami Malek, was he didn't hit yet at that point. Dakota Johnson was still pretty young.
No, Rami did. Yeah, Rami. None of those guys hit at the time. And then Imogen Poots, I think, was the one. I think that was the one they were thinking that would be the breakout.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Kid Cudi?
I'm not sure what she's up to now. Kid Cudi, they thought was going to be a big breakout, and he sort of breaking out, I guess, a little bit now. But he's doing a more.
Oh yeah, he was in Bill and Ted 3.
I think I met him. Yeah. Was he? Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I need to watch that. I need to watch Bill and Ted 3. It's my generation, so.
It's cool. It's very nostalgic. And for me, I think the coolest thing about that movie is the fact that they're still friends in real life. I think that's my favorite thing. Not like if somebody gets really famous and the other person switches to directing, because that's what Alex puts together phenomenal documentaries. But I just think it's so cool that they're really friends from meeting on that audition in 1986, 87 or whatever. And they're still that close. Wild.
That's awesome when you can have that kind of friendship or dynamic that can last through that. I mean, and then if you're working together, the shorthand is unbelievable. Like which is also another cool thing about working with siblings, by the way, too, is the shorthand is crazy in an industry where time is of the essence. Mm-hmm. Like from pre-production through production through post all the way, time is of the essence, right? So if you have anybody in your life, somebody who you're really close friends with or a brother or something, and you can go, like the thing from the thing, from back in the, like, it's like, oh yeah. And then that just created like an entire setup. It's not a room full of people having to do storyboard setups and talking you through it or showing you music and how it, it's like, no, the thing with the thing from whenever. Yeah, that got it.
Yep.
Done. And now you just like the amount of time and I really do believe that in addition to just feeling safe creatively and all these other things. I do believe that's why people go to the same people over. A lot of directors will use the same composer. They'll use they'll use the same DP. They'll use the same editor, and it's because a lot of it is the shorthand. So that when can you imagine? And an edit with an editor for the first time versus the 8th time. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? It's like can we just go back to these to these pieces and just that and then that kind of like before, and they go, oh yeah, or like when we did the thing. And then now, instead of having to like painfully walk your editor through the cuts you wanted or whatever, right? Or the beats or the pacing. Huge difference, man. And so I honestly believe that's why people can also stay friends for longer too in this business. People can be friends for 30 years because in a lot of ways, it's a creative marriage. You'd be lost without this person, after 8 films, so I'm sure, if you have a great relationship if you're a director and you have a great relationship with an editor, and that editor retires or passes away or something, I'm sure that your next, you feel a massive void moving forward, at least for a while. Like, just like you would have, like, somebody died in a marriage. Yeah. It's like, oh my God, that I needed that person. You know what I'm saying? And also the opposite happens, right? Which is just like, okay, we've done this many movies together. It's run its course. And we used to love each other, but now everything feels like it's work, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That now might be time for a divorce, right? And now you have like whatever happened between Sam Raimi and Danny Elfman kind of a situation,
Oh yeah, the first one I thought of was Harold Ramis and Bill Murray, but no, you're right. Like the way these people can have how can they not? They've made such great movies together. They were the best of friends. How do they not talk anymore? It's like I don't know. Something happened on Groundhog's Day that nobody
something can happen, man.
Yeah.
There's a few of those kind of stories out there. And there's I think it's just one of those things where, people grow apart, and it's not even necessarily, it can be creatively, but it could also be personally, mm-hmm. Which in our world, it's, at least for me anyway, it's hard to separate my work from my personality or my work from who I am as a person, right? Whether I'm doing music, which is what I'm generally, is what I'm known for, is what I've been doing for 30 years, or whether I'm doing something else creative, it's who I am is in it. So it's hard to not take it personally. So I think when people grow apart and there can become disagreements, a lot of those things can start digging in personally. It's not about, you're not talking about changing the layout of a PowerPoint presentation. You're talking about emoting the scene, and that scene means something to that director, and it probably meant something slightly different to the writer, who's probably slightly annoyed with the director. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then the director's not going to communicate what that should mean to the composer, but no matter what, the composer's going to probably bring something of himself into that scene too. So, there's just no way to not do it. If you're doing a scene where, you're scoring Kramer versus Kramer 2, The Reckoning, and there's another divorce sequence, and you went through a terrible divorce, how you score that, or your terrible divorce in your own personal experience is going to come across in the music in this divorce scene. It just is. If you're, and your own personal experiences and trauma and triggers, those are all going to go into the music. Those are all going to go into the words. Those are all going to go into the camera. So when people grow apart or have different ideologies, that can happen too, which will change how they want to approach making this project. Because they want to say something about this in America today, but everybody else is saying, why the hell would you want to say that? Just saying like, I don't want to be a part of that. And so people start growing apart. I don't know specifically with Danny Elfman and Sam Raimi, or those kind of things, or Harold Ramis and Bill Murray, which I didn't even know about that one. I wasn't aware of that.
They just stopped talking. And even one from a few years, I think his daughter came out and said that Bill visited, but he never talked about it publicly, Bill Murray, but he said he visited Harold at the end. Like they hung out, because he passed away probably in the last 10 years. So they kind of made up. But even more recently was that weird one with Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, because John C. Reilly, Will Ferrell wanted to play Jerry Buss in the Lakers HBO series.
Right.
And what's his name? But Adam McKay produced and wrote it and all that stuff. So he said he basically probably just forgot to tell Will or something, or it was too much of a chicken. I have no idea, but he told him like, all right, fine.
I've heard that,
and then he told John C. Reilly, oh, you have the role. So then Will Ferrell and all of them didn't like each other. But I just saw they made up at like Snoop Dogg's birthday party. They were both on stage singing Boats and Hoes for him. But I'm like, it's like you said.
Excellent.
You don't really know in some of the instances. But to go back to what you said earlier, it's so true. So many of those guerrilla style filmmakers, like even back then, hey, we have 2 weeks to shoot, like the Roger Cormans of the world, the Jim Wynorskis, they always have the same guys. If you look at the people they hire in front of the camera, behind the camera, you're right. That's the only way you could do it. You couldn't.
Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
Do like that shorthand and be done in 2 weeks. It's impossible.
You can't do it that quickly. And that's the thing, is like, if you have more time, then chances are you're not going to want to spend that time explaining stuff. You're going to want to spend that time getting more coverage, or getting something, or going further with specials, right? Like, oh, let's do a special that we're only going to use for this one shot in a scene, as opposed to, just basic coverage, right? You would want to spend that time to be more creative. You want to spend that time explaining the same stuff you're going to be getting anyway. So you want to go back to those same guys. So like the advice, obviously, that I've given composers, and I'm trying to think, has anybody else besides composers ever asked for my advice? That probably wouldn't be very smart of them if they did. I think it's only musicians and composers have ever asked my advice. And it would be like the temptation is to like intern or like become a ghostwriter or an assistant to like a big net, like a Hans Zimmer or something like that, right? But I really believe the value would be like finding really, really talented directors and writers who are themselves fighting for their space. Like they're not big already, and then, but and a lot of people's comment on that would be like, well, then some people, end up not doing much or whatever. But I think that there's a lot of value in just doing a lot of work in which somebody cares about all of that work. I think that's what's important. Because I also did a few things that I in retrospect don't love. So
Yeah.
I have a bunch of those. I have a bunch of those Sci-Fi Channel, Lifetime, Hallmarky. It's either a 20 million-year-old slug that comes back up to eat people, or it's a divorcee who is living in a small town and getting a second chance at Christmas or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, the way I survived on those was I would give myself assignments because here's the point I'm trying to make is like they don't care. Like a lot. I mean, maybe some of them do now, and if you're listening, I don't mean you. But there's a lot of stuff where it's just like the people making those movies, writing it, directing it, just getting it to the finish line, don't really care about the material. They just need to get it to the finish line. So it's a paycheck, right? And that can be fun if you're a young guy like me because it's like, okay, I'm going to do this entire score. I would do it as personal studies because I didn't go to school. So it's like, okay, I'm going to approach this whole score like Rachel Portman. I'm going to do a whole Rachel Portman personal study. And that's what the score is, because it doesn't matter. It's not going to be like, oh my God, this Nathan Furst score from Don't Take My Baby 12. Nobody cares. So if I do my own little interesting English Rachel Portman score to just study, and then I'll do a creature feature, I'll do a Jerry Goldsmith thing. Like I'm going to do Jerry Gore. I'm going to be Danny Elfman for this entire score. It's not really about what I think. It's really about like the fun. It's about the fun of like exploring those ideas. And then what happens is over time, as you start to get into the bigger stuff, you start cherry picking almost like what from those like personal studies that you like, right? And that's how I sort of came up with what I feel like is my sound. And there are people that, call out little motifs and stuff that I borrow, from those kind of guys. And I will call myself out immediately. I wear that stuff proudly. Yeah. So if I'm doing something, as a matter of fact, my mixer, Mark Curry, fantastic, amazing mixer. He refused to to mix any more of my scores unless I stopped doing a particular James Horner riff that James Horner would constantly do. But I'm a James Horner fan in a lot of ways, so I find myself wanting to do that. So he would do these little things where there's just like, ya-da-na-na. There's this little sort of like, it would be in a trumpet or it would be sometimes in low strings. But you're in a scene or an action thing, and it's like it's just these little things. So I started stealing it because I like it. Same thing with Danny Elfman. He would do these like sort of builds. And, anyway, but so those are the value of those. But I also think I did them too long. So it's like you can learn who you are, how you want to work your workflow for fast, because those things are amazing. They paid me, and like here's some money. Here's the movie. Can you show up on the dub stage in 2 weeks with 80 minutes of music, please? And literally, that's pretty much it. So, like, whatever you wanted to do as a composer at the time, I don't know if they're still doing this, was more or less, like, as long as it wasn't wrong or inappropriate, like, to be like, cool. Like, they wouldn't care if you did this versus that to achieve the same vibe emotionally. So I would use it as a study. But then what happens is that over time, if nobody's pushing you to become more creative, you get into this monotony of just like sort of what me and some friends used to call music by the pound. You're not really thinking about it. You don't really care about it. You're just getting it done. You know what I mean? And I definitely would say like I did that for too long. I did that for way too long. Just doing like cruddy, small. I don't want to say cruddy. Lower scale things that are a very specific thing for a very specific audience. I did them too long. So when you find people, you can get stale that way. And I think that can be bad in the industry as well. And then if you're doing too much of the same thing, people will really hold it against you when they're looking at your IMDb or whatever. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, it's like, so if I say like, oh, I want to be the composer for Ant-Man, most people are going to be like, no, why would we give that to you? Regardless of what the music might say, I'm not saying my music's worthy of that. But yeah, if that makes any sense. So,
no, I know, but that's what it should be. It should be like the back of a baseball card. Like, hey, what are your, let's hear it. And then that's what it is. It shouldn't be like looking at what somebody did in their rookie year to see what they're doing now.
I know.
That's the one thing
I think a lot of that is because, what would you say?
No, it's just not fair. I think if somebody can direct a movie that is on a Sci-Fi Channel movie, but if somebody visually looks at it like a producer or somebody and goes, I want this guy to direct this next movie, then they go to the studio and it's like, oh, but this guy doesn't, it looks good, but people are going to know that he worked on, and I think that's, I don't know. It's ridiculous.
It's crazy, man. What was crazy when I was young, you know what I used to get? I used to get all the time. I was able to do, when I was really young, and it actually got me a little bit of attention, thank God, I was one of the earlier guys who was able to like produce a mock-up without an orchestra that kind of sounded like an orchestra. It never really sounds exactly like an orchestra, but I was one of the first guys that was able to. Oh yeah, I was called into a couple of movies to help some other composers. Like, hey, how are you achieving those strings or whatever? That's very, very early. It's not anything you couldn't do now, on your own, like your average composer. But at the time, we're talking about 2001, and I'd be called in to help those guys out. I was going somewhere with this, but now I lost it. Total brain fart. It was good though. I know what it was. Fucking hell. Sorry, I don't know about cursing. Are we allowed to curse?
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, totally.
All right, sorry, man. So it's that kind of a thing where it's like I would produce these like massive things that sounded somewhat like an 80-piece orchestra, right? And people would say, "Yeah, that sounds really good, but can you handle a live orchestra?" And it's like now I think people understand, but at the time in 2002, it's like I couldn't explain it. It's like, no, man, that shit's easier. That's way easier than doing a mock-up, because if you need something to change, you take your pencil and you go like this and you say, "Hey, do that thing now," and they'll do that thing. If I'm doing it alone, it takes me an hour to find a way to make something. So trust me, I'll tell you right now. If somebody who's like intimately trying to make a MIDI mock-up, what they call a MIDI mock-up, sample mock-up for basically doing a orchestral piece of music, but only in the computer. You're pulling up your own clarinet, then you're pulling up your own bassoon, then you're pulling up your own first violin.
It's a lot of tracks.
It's a lot of tracks. A lot of composers like myself are templates for a typical movie score. The templates start I just want to see what I want to start with, and you click it open. You're looking at like 600 tracks.
That's insane.
700 tracks. I know some guys, like some of the big names, because they have like teams of people keeping the whole thing. They keep the enterprise ship running. They have their templates starting at 1,500 tracks. They have, and they're disabled and then hidden. But it's like, oh, I need to go to my obscure Chinese lithophone. They already have it loaded. They just search it, pull it up, and then re-enable it. They do all these things, But my template, I always kept pretty lean at around 500 tracks. And then you have other like reverbs and all these other things to sort of keep that world going and to keep that space going, which changes depending on what the movie is too, right? Which is now with samples, it's a lot easier to do. You can achieve pretty much anything by yourself in the studio, which is why big orchestras have it's become a problem lately. There's not as many, and a lot of the big recording studios have closed down. So there's not nearly as many places in like Los Angeles' instance to record a live orchestra for a score.
Oh, wow.
As there used to be. Not even close. Most of them have shut down because there's just nobody to fill the room. And the studios like Paramount, all that, all they see is square footage not being used,
Yeah.
So that's what it is. They bulldoze it, which you can have a chicken and egg conversation, but that also goes hand in hand with as the internet speed became faster, you used to be able to record. You can record remotely, like to Europe. So I could sit in the studio right now and book a session with Prague and supervise that session from sitting in my little office here. You know what I mean? So as that became more possible, then the studio starts shutting down all the music stuff here. So which just made it more and more like you had to be able to do it yourself in the studio. So, but yeah, I used to get that early question is no more of just like, well, you can produce the music in your room, but could you handle it with live people? It's like, yeah, fool, that's easier.
Yeah.
People don't get it. So the same thing you can blow out to directors. It's like, I have a lot of respect for directors who are told, hey, you're going to make a science fiction creature feature with X amount of effect shots, and you've got 18 days. And you're doing it for $1 million. It's like, and most directors are not going to want to like blindly walk through it. They're going to want to make it as good as they can possibly get. So that requires like the time, the energy, expertise, stagecraft. So yeah, man, that's always been a confusing thing to me of just like why they don't, why lower budget stuff, why it's hard to break through.
No, I know.
Because I would think, to me, it's like swinging in the dugout with 3 bats. It's like it's easier to swing with 1 bat.
Yeah.
It's easier. If you say, hey, I really need $50,000 more for these percussion players, and I want the best in the world, and the other line of the phone says, sure, no problem. What day would you like? That's easier. That's not harder. That's easier.
Yeah. So process wise, obviously when you're working with people that you have a relationship with, it's probably easier, just like the going back and forth. But like when you work with like a first time director and you're doing the score for the movie, what are some like what is the conversation? Are you watching the movie that they give you and writing down, hey, this scene 1, like how does that work? Like the back and forth of it?
Well, that's what's crazy about movies, and it's like people will. Another advice I'll get asked is like I'll get asked a lot of questions about hierarchy. Like who do you listen to more than this? And just like what you're asking, that can often change from movie to movie, and it can be very disorienting to suss out. You know what I mean? So the only consistent thing I would do, is like, okay, whatever is available to me, a script, a rough cut of the movie. If the director's not comfortable showing a rough cut yet, because if it's that early, I'll ask to come into the edit bay and like watch the 2 or 3 scenes that they think, are the heart of the movie and that are close to done. Like anything I can watch, I want to, so that we can have a conversation on a level playing field. From that point, it changes constantly. So I've had directors be all but completely absent, like not even part of the process. Because they're either too intimidated or they don't care or they don't know what to ask for. And essentially the editor has led a spotting session or led a conversation. But often what will happen is after I watch the movie, I'll try to talk to whoever seems to be in charge and most passionate. So you'll have the director who may be in charge, but you may be watching him constantly deferring to his producer, who really loves movie scores, who really, okay, well, then I'm going to start zeroing in on what the producer is saying, because that seems to be where the director is leaning, or it's not. The director has a very strong image of what he wants. But after watching it, I'll just ask, what do they want to achieve? Now, if I'm doing one of these kind of creature features, Slug wakes up after 20 million years of people, then I don't really need to ask that question, right? We know what we're trying to achieve. It's a popcorn. We know what we're trying to do. But if we're trying to do anything else, even a well-crafted like action or horror film, which is a genre movie and theoretically should only, theoretically on its face has its obvious goals, right? But a lot of times you'll have a director or a producer or whoever saying, to me, this is really a conversation about gun control, or this is really a conversation, and it may not even have a gun in it. Like, who knows? It could be like, whoa, I don't know where you got that. Okay. So, but then at least that helps you go through, because it's at the end of the day, they're approving everything, right? So you're not writing a score for your own satisfaction. You're writing a score. It's a collective effort, just like a movie is, and it's always a collective effort. So you have people who have to agree with that choice. And brain farted again.
No, I was just wondering, because you talked about obviously like working with DreamWorks. You said that it was like, quote unquote dream to work with them, because it was like an easy back and forth. I could find, if there's too many cooks, that's why it's great to have a relationship when you're doing the scores and then they're listening to it with the scene and seeing how it is. And then the back and forth, it's because music is so important to a scene. Obviously dialogue is, but dialogue shot on the set, and the movie is already done, and the music is for the most part. Yeah. So like I always say, like, I only talked to one other composer ever. I talked to Peter Bernstein. So obviously his dad, he had a pretty good, he didn't want to do it. He wanted to be a rock and roller, but then he just got to the point that he just wasn't getting to the point that he wanted to, even though he told me some of the bands that he opened up for, they were really cool. And here's like a really cool story that I'm sure maybe you never heard of, but he went to school with Peter Landis. Peter Bernstein did. So John Landis. So John Landis went to high school with him. There was a bunch of other famous people.
Right.
When John Landis was doing Animal House, he was really young, But since he used to hang over at the house with Peter and he talked to Elmer a bunch, he said to, was it Universal, right, that did Animal House? Or
yeah, that's Universal. Yeah, exactly.
So he pulled a card out during a meeting with Universal. He said, well, you know what? I'm going to have Elmer Bernstein's going to score the movie. So they're like, bullshit. So they called the house and Elmer picks up and he says, yeah, I would score the movie. And it was like this one of those moments, because I don't know if John would have he might have got the movie anyway. Maybe it was like a moot point in the story. But he goes, yeah. So from then on, his dad for like, I think he said 8 years, his dad got over doing comedy movies because he was doing like the Great Escape, but he did like, if you look at his IMDb, there's like a turn at Animal House that it's all comedies. Stripes,
that's really
at
funny.
Ghostbusters. But yeah, just because he was buddies with him and he got him to say yes to it. And then his career kind of took this turn that he's doing every big comedy for like 8-10 years. But
of course, and all of those are sprouts of Animal House. They're all
yeah.
You know, like you can almost describe those movies as it's those 80s, goofy like Porky's or any of these other things. It's a post-Animal. Those are post-Animal House comedies for sure.
It changed everything. Animal House really changed everything, and your dad's role in that movie, to go off on a tangent, is phenomenal because he was that guy that everybody. If you watch all of those movies after Animal House, there is a guy that is a Flounder type character. It's wild that it changed. It really changed everything.
I'll show this one. My dad had a great story about just how brutal Hollywood is sometimes, right? His story is that he went in one time and read for a part, right? And on the sides, the sides are like a little piece of the script you get when you go into audition. And it was described as a Stephen Furst type. Okay?
That's amazing.
Not kidding. According to him, it's literally written on the sides, Stephen Furst type on it. He's reading for it. He didn't get it. We ended up going with someone else. But yeah, so like basically that character that I haven't read the script on the page. We have copies of it, but I haven't read the script on the page. But I'm assuming his character's on the page a lot. But obviously, what my dad was able to sort of like massage out of that and bring to life out of that, created its own sort of lovable naive. You needed a lovable naive character, preferably fat, preferably overweight, right? You know what I mean? Not always, but 80% of the time needed to be overweight, but also naive and lovable, right? And that became this whole archetype, which was really funny. Is like because. While he was not like that, there's a part of him that kind of was. So kind of like what I was saying before, it's like no matter what you do, who you are goes into the process. You know what I'm saying? So there's absolutely parts of him, just growing up with him that are absolutely, that's sort of like, you guys playing cards? Like there's some sort of like, it's like it's when I'm watching those movies, especially like an Animal House. It's not wholly watching a character. There is parts of there. It's like, oh, that's dead. That's dead. There's lots of death. So that's actually really cool too. It's like after, if you have a parent who, after they die, and if you're lucky enough that they were a sensation for a decade, or whatever, you can literally just go on YouTube and it's your own private reel, it's amazing in its own way.
It is really cool to see that.
Yeah. The weird one was when I went to a urinal once. And there was a picture of him at the restaurant I was at. Wasn't ready. And this is maybe a couple of years ago. And I'm like, oh, okay. Hey, Dad, what's up, man?
What? Just
weird. It's like I'll chase you down.
A still from Animal House.
The still from Animal House that they were just putting in the. I guess they were putting it in the. It was in like one of these gastropub places in LA. You know what I mean? And it's just sort of like I guess they were going for like to give that vibe, that energy. So they had taken like stills from the movie and put it up all over the bathroom. And like right over the urinal I walk up to, it's like, all right, sweet. Okay, cool. But yeah, man, he created a whole character. And then that was his career. That's what's crazy. It's just like he came out here in like his early 20s and just landed that movie and then literally dined out on that, like became versions of that role.
Yeah.
For the next 15 years, something like that.
And your mom's in the movie.
It's really awesome. She is.
Which is great.
She's in one shot. Theoretically, I am actually too, because as they say, she was pregnant with me in that shot.
Really? Oh, okay, cool. So you're in the marble store.
Yeah, I'm in the marble store. Yeah, that's me. I'm the fetus. I'm fetus number one.
So you know, another baby in the movie too is Eliza Roberts now, but she was supposed to have a bigger role, but she got pregnant. She was friends with John Landis. So her kid, I forget his name. He's a guitar player, but she went to a role that she was like sitting for most of the movie.
Oh, that's so interesting. I don't know her.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. She's married. Not the only one. I didn't realize I had competition.
Yeah, she's married to Eric Roberts now, but her parents were like writers in Hollywood. So she went to high school with John Landis and Peter Bernstein. And she was in his first movie, Schlock.
That's funny.
So yeah, so there's like this weird connection with it. But yeah, she's like sitting down at the reception when they go to pick up the girls at the fraternity. So yeah. But wow, man. Yeah,
I know exactly what scene you're talking about.
Yeah, at the sorority. Yeah, she's sitting down. And that's her. She was supposed to be, I don't know which role she was supposed to have of the
That's really funny.
3 girls. But no, it's crazy to think about how one movie can really change. I'm sure for all the other genres, like maybe Halloween for slasher films, but definitely comedy.
Oh, yeah.
That changed it all. And your dad's, just so many of the lines of his movie. But that's cool that you say that blood, that was him bleeding onto the screen, like the hello.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. My brother and I still do that, by the way. We still just randomly say hello to each other. Hello. We this. We have this ability to pitch into his voice if we want to.
That's awesome.
It's funny.
Dream Team. I was telling Griff, one of the movies that I think is super underrated. I have no idea why, because it is 4 heavyweights of comedy in one movie is Dream Team.
Oh yeah.
Every person in that movie, like Christopher Lloyd's character in that movie, is unreal because the way he acts like the doctor for 98% of the movie, it is so good. I love it.
It's amazing. And on the day, it was so interesting too, because obviously I was a huge fan of Back to the Future. Like,
yeah, that's true.
Freak. Both my brother and I were there for a lot of the filming, and he was just so. When I saw him, he was so different and so odd, and I didn't understand. I never spoke with him, but I would see him on the set, and I didn't quite understand it. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I shot that up in Toronto, and that was a really cool experience to just sit there and just like we would get to sit there behind Video Village, where they're shooting with the director in that area.
That's awesome.
When you're that age, you don't realize what a privilege that is.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we're gonna crash the ambulance into the cop car now. Ready, everybody? That was cool. So they have one good sort of car wreck stunt in that movie, and I was so excited because I got to sit there and watch that, behind the camera. I don't know if Griff was there, but I was there.
But that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Anything like
and Michael Keaton was really great too.
Oh yeah, nice.
Because again, I had seen Batman, and I was like, holy cow, that's like I had gone online after watching Batman. So the fact that it was him. And every now and then he would just sort of walk by and goof off with us, like punch us in the old arm or something like that. I think just on I think my dad had said like, oh, he loves the Batman movie you did, or he loves Batman, or no, it hadn't come out yet, or he had just come out, or he's about to do it, or something like that. But I had
the timing makes sense.
Oh,
yeah.
It's very it's very like interesting to me. So, But I remember just staring at Michael Keaton, just being like, just sort of really studying. But he was really nice. Everybody was really nice. It was an amazing experience to just
That's
be
cool.
there for all this stuff.
Yeah. Especially being a kid, you get exposed to it, and you can be like, "Hey, this is something I might want to be involved with." But especially you guys, it's like it was a must. We were intimately aware of show business and making movies and all that. I mean, very early on, one of our first memories is in one of our houses. We made an interactive haunted house and then tried to charge neighborhood kids for it, like as a feeder sort of thing, and created different elements, to that would get scarier as you went further along. We were very, very young at the time, so it's like and then there was another time we had a playhouse that we ruined trying to do our own stunt show. So it was a 2-story playhouse that we rigged by sawing it almost in half, and then Griff would jump out the end of it while the rest of it collapsed, that kind of stuff.
So we were trying to find ways to stage stuff from very early on, and we were very acutely aware of the concept of creating a show or a concept that looks like we're doing something that we're not. And what is it? And what does that mean? You know, that kind of thing. It's like, oh, let's make it look like we're doing it. So we were trying to put on shows very early on, man.
Yeah.
And so we were very aware of that. Absolutely learned. Yeah, when you're around that stuff, you can't help but learn it, you know?
Yeah. One movie I have to ask you about, because obviously you have a ton. It's not like whenever I talk to people, we go through everything. But I don't know why I've always been obsessed with those movies, but those 12 Rounds movies. And I watched the one that you did, the Randy Orton one, because that's what WWF does.
Oh,
it
my
seems
God.
They always do the first movie is Cena, and then the second one is like Orton, or then they do like the Miz, like they made like a bunch of those Marine movies, but like that one, Randy Orton, it's like, obviously he probably makes a ton of money from wrestling because he's still doing it. But I'm like, this guy's he's not bad. And they're cool. The concept of the movies is such an 80s vibe. Like I could see a movie with like Stallone or 100%. Arnold, you know?
It's completely unapologetic. You know, what I now call, I tend to call them Rambro movies.
Yeah.
You know, they're just Rambros, you know, and Rambros are great. Rambro movies are great. They're a very specific thing, and it's absolutely an homage to the sort of super cop superhero of the 80s, you know, the super justice guy, you know, holding, you know, double machine guns, you know, shooting everybody down. It's always an homage to that. It was a lot of fun. That one was one of those ones that went really fast. I think I did that score in 3 weeks.
Oh, nice.
You know, it was, I don't even think I was on the dub stage for that. They were, WWE was a very, I don't want to say it wasn't a negative experience, but it was not quite the DreamWorks-y. It didn't feel inclusive, and it was more about just, you know, do this. You know, we want your music. Just do this.
Yeah, do the thing.
Do the thing. Do you know that thing? That's good. You know, like in this thing I'm doing here. It's a lot of that.
Yeah,
it's like, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in Hollywood in general. By the way, it's like somebody will be telling you that you're amazing and they love you. But somehow the face isn't. It's like we really love what you. We really love what you do. Yeah. Really like what you do. It's very good. But it's like, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that. So, but yeah, that was one of those months. Like I literally wrote the score. I don't think I got a single note. It was in and out. But I had a lot of fun doing it. I had a lot of fun doing that one. It was a really good one.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the director. Infamous one that you work on was the Cousin Eddie's Island.
Okay. God bless. Rest in peace, Matty Simmons. He was the producer of one of the producers of Animal House.
Really? That's really cool that you got to work with him.
I did, and that's how he became aware of me, and I got that job. He was a very interesting guy, very funny guy in his own way. But the way he approached music was very sort of like that's a great example. I had no interactions with that director at all, not one. I don't even know who the director is for that movie. I'm not sure. But that can sometimes be the case for TV, right? So TV sometimes
TV definitely
goes there for production and he's out. But then that's not always the case for TV movies though. Like sometimes the TV, you know, because now it's kind of like treated a little bit more like a movie. But in this case it was Matty. It was the director. It was the producer, Matty. And it was just very, so, you know, some of this comes up, you know, probably just a little fiddle. Just do a little fiddle or something here. It's like, okay, we'll do a little fiddle. So I'm not going to get any notes that way. But basically, his one thing that was very important to him was that every single piece of music had to have a homage to a Christmas carol of some sort. So there was not a piece of music that was supposed to be written that didn't have some sort of counter motif from jingle bells coming into it at some point. Yeah. Or, you know, it had to be, and of course, because of the situation, they have to be public domain. So now it's like I have a songbook of public domain Christmas songs, and I'm just sort of going through them and trying to build cues off of them. But that was my main task for that movie, was make sure that the entire score has Christmas carols weaving through the score. But keep it like, try to keep it like a big adventure, you know, in the sort of vein of what the vacation movies had done, where it was like orchestral, but it was silly. But then sometimes, you know, the very early vacation movies kind of almost started doing like that 80s disco thing sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
the car's going, and this sort of like that kind of stuff. But over time, I went away from that, went to more of that sort of like grand orchestral stuff. So, but yeah, man, that was the goal. That was the goal. That was a very interesting movie.
And you were young at that time. Obviously, you have your dad to lean on and other people, but you're like 25 getting, or 24 getting like
20,
kind of like
24,
odd, like odd, not an odd note, but it's like, okay, do this.
Oh yeah.
You got to add this in. So it's got to be like, that's difficult.
Yeah. And didn't go to school, by the way. So
yeah, I know.
There's no music theory training. There's just whatever I did. Whatever I was capable of doing. So there was definitely a little bit like, okay, So it was just about, yeah, man, that's what it was. I was 24, and it really just comes down to, what you learn growing up in this business is, well, one thing my dad taught me, at least, probably both of us, is that it's the concept of, especially in the world of show business and stagecraft and all these other things. It's like if anybody else, if another human being, if another person who quantifies as a human being is capable of doing it, then how hard can it possibly be, right? So if you start everything from that point, it's like, okay, well, I don't really know what I'm doing, and now I got to weave in traditional Christmas carols into an orchestral film score that gets delivered in 5 to 6 weeks, fully produced, without a live orchestra or anything like that. Yes, I can do that.
Yeah.
And then when you hang up the phone, you go like, God, how the hell am I going to do that? But you just do it. Yeah, absolutely. But you don't say it on the phone. You just say, oh, yeah, I got that. No worries. And then you figure it out, and chances are you'll figure it out, which is what I did. Is that, I don't think I won any awards that year for that. Or any year. Yeah, man, it was a lot of fun. And that kind of stuff was always a very valuable education. And at 24, I was just beside myself, thrilled to get that job. Yeah. Absolutely thrilled. And nothing short of it. And to this day, I'm very, very grateful for it. And that was when, that was a different budget level too. Like, the budget for those things is not what they would do if they were making that movie now. It would be made for a fraction of that now, so I'm grateful for having gotten to do it at the time I did it,
Yeah. And I think when it comes to schooling, I think, especially in this, I'm sure there's so many people that are in Hollywood that, in front or behind the camera. I just always think when it comes to like creative things, if you go to school and somebody's teaching you and 20 people how to do a certain thing, obviously there's things you can take from it, but when you're learning on your own, you're learning at your pace and putting your like fingerprint on it. It's like,
right.
Like if somebody Stadler is one of the famous acting schools, right? Stadler or Statler.
I don't know though.
One of those.
I'm
saying like they have 12 people in a class at a time. All of those people are learning to cry the same way, do things the same way. So it's good to see people have their own, you're putting your own different touch. The way you look at it is going to be different than the people that went to the same music class. And I think that's something that is important. I know obviously it worked out for you. But maybe
I agree. Well, it did and it didn't. I mean, I know I have. There's going to be potholes in my knowledge and education. But what's good is that that's where, especially if you have the time and budget to like work with live musicians or all these other people, that's where you can rely on what their experience is. Like, this is what I'm, just like a director, right? Like, this is what I'm looking to achieve. A director, and that's actually a big difference that I find that makes composing a very underappreciated thing. Is that I see it as like a composer literally has to write the script, direct the movie, produce the movie, edit it, deliver it, like the same idea. We have to produce a concept from beginning to end and deliver that thing we really need to be able to do that completely on our own. We need to be able to orchestrate, compose, produce in the studio, every little aspect of the process. We now need to know. Back in the day, you could have multiple people doing those things. But it's a very underappreciated appreciated thing to do that. There was a point where I was rolling it back. I'm losing it again, but somebody watching will understand the point I was trying to make. But it can be it could be yeah, it could be it's a lot of work as a composer to do all this.
Yeah. No, and I know, like you said, like there might be some like potholes in knowledge from not like those music theory and everything, but I think
that's what it was. Yeah, but the ideas become more original that way, and you adjust them, and you can look. There's an old jazz musician joke, which is somebody, if they're in auditioning or something, somebody will say to them, "Can you read? Can you read music?" And the correct response is, "Not enough to hurt my playing." That's the correct response. It's like, yes, but, right? Yes, but I don't read so well that I don't know how to play my instrument. That's really the joke. And I do believe in the same thing as composing. If you only have this like super traditional education and everything is based off of, I don't know, like Rimsky-Korsakov principles of orchestration from the 1700s or something, these kind of things, and it's extremely formal. I think that gives you more tools to work with for sure. And makes you more educated and able to pull, and it extends your language 100%. But it can also create a limitation, because basically, if all these other things which do exist, surely that's all there is, right? Surely not one more thing can be invented or created, which of course is not true. Everything can be invented and created. And I just think I think actually to a certain extent either not a lack of education, but an ability to segregate that from your own ideas will lead to better quality work, whether it's making a movie as a whole, or writing a score, or writing an orchestral piece, or a pop record. Yeah. Rick Rubin says great things on that. Rick Rubin is all about, which God bless him, crazy guy. I don't know if you know who Rick Rubin is.
No, really, I should know him. For
record
what?
Producer.
Oh, yeah.
Literally everything.
Okay.
Literally everything. I don't know if I've ever seen a photo of the guy with shoes on. He goes to the studio bare. He looks like he's homeless, but he just has this great. He has this great, interesting ethic. That I wouldn't know how to describe it, whether it's a work ethic or a spiritual ethic. He might argue that they're both. I don't know, but that sort of thing of just like everything you do is an offering to God, as it were. Right? Like you always want to work in a very pure form. So, I try to follow those things as well, which doesn't always require a traditional background.
Yeah.
I would say I would argue the same thing of directors. Like would Hitchcock have come up with all the stuff he came up with if I don't know what his upbringing is. Maybe he is maybe he went to a film school, but I doubt it. I don't know. But I think ignorance can lead to invention.
No, 100%. So Nathan, this has been so much fun. One question I have for you, and I didn't ask Peter this, and it's a question that I don't know why it always everybody has to audition in front of the camera, behind the camera. But for some reason, I never thought. I talked to a director and I asked him about he brought up a story about auditioning to direct a movie. And I don't know why in my head I always thought it was like, hey, I'm producer Bob. I love you directed blank. We want you to direct this next movie. I never thought of a director going in and being like, oh, here is what I would make the movie look like. I don't know why I never thought of that, but I'm sure composers do the same thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you got it right on directors. I think a producer calls a director and says, hey, I really loved what you did, and I'm thinking about you for this next thing.
Yeah.
So basically you were right. The producer did see something of that director's and then called him. But then what he called him for was, I'd like you to audition.
Yeah. I just never thought of the audition process. I never put that into my mind.
It could be challenging.
Yeah. But for you,
for sure.
But so how does that work for composers?
It's valid, for sure. So these days, it's what I call the bake-off. So we basically go into a bake-off. So they'll usually try to narrow. I mean, there are some people who I personally find it to be not as respectful to do this cattle call where you're going to do this. I think some people do it. I think most don't, which is that they tend to you'll send in demos, or you'll send them, a link that has all your music in it. One of the popular ones is a site called Real Crafter. So you can build it and somebody can come and click on it. Listen to this piece of music, that piece of music, whatever it is. From that and or your credits, they know you from this show, right? They'll call you and say, hey, we think you might be right for this thing, so here's what we're going to do. You and 3 other people are going to get this one scene. We're going to give you a week to score it. and then you got to send it back to us. So they'll send you, and sometimes it's not completed. If it's live action, obviously it's an assembly, but often if it's an animation, it could be the storyboards or a grayscale animatic. You know, it could be very, very far away from the final. And then you'll get like a QuickTime video. And then sometimes they won't even give you instruction on like where to start, where to stop. They'll just say, hey, let's see what you do. So then you're given this like, say, 10-minute sequence. And so the overzealous composer might be like, the young guy might be like, oh, I should score this whole 10 minutes front to back. But that may not, they may be actually kind of trying to see what your instincts are to come in and out, right? Because like you were saying earlier, a movie is can be so defined by its music, as far as like the music can really add a signature to what that movie is. Mm-hmm. But a movie is also defined by the music it's not doing, right? Like when it's not playing a cue. So they want to see that too, I'm sure. They want to see what your sensibility is. But you'll just get it and you'll literally score it with the 600 tracks in Pro Tools or Cubase or whatever program you're using. And sometimes they don't even give you direction as far as instruments. Sometimes they won't say, we want this to be a solo guitar score versus a big orchestra. They just want to see what you're going to do. And if they've called you and said, hey, we love what you did on Bionicle, or we love what you did on Active Valley, it's like, then I can go like, okay, well, I know that's the general vibe that they're probably trying to look for, right? You get the video, sometimes it'll make more sense. Oh, of course, that's what they want, right? But then you're going to sit there and score it for, whatever, a week, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes longer. And then you'll send it in. And then sometimes they'll narrow it down and they give you a different scene, and now it's between you and one other person. So literally, by the time you've gotten the job, you've scored 2 or 3 scenes.
Yeah.
It's like at least part of the job is done, right? But no, that's actually how they choose composers a lot.
Wow.
Is they do the bake off. I understand it, and it's been going on for a long time. I mean, that's actually how I got the Bionicle job when I was 23.
Oh, really?
It was between me and one other guy, another Nathan, and I happened to get it, for whatever reason. I'm sure, like I'm very reluctant to say that my music was objectively better. It may have fit more what they were looking for, but also it could have been any number of things. It could have been any number of reasons why somebody would get a job over another thing, as far as tone or whatever else. So, but yeah, that's the process now. You just audition, you'll get sent a scene. Sometimes after that, or sometimes before and or after that, you might go in for a meeting or a Zoom call and just have a conversation. Because a lot of times they also want to vibe you, right? They want to know that if they have to be stuck on a dub stage with you for 12 hours a day or have long conversations, that you're like a decent human being to want to be around for that amount of time, right? So it's like, okay, they're cool. They're not weird. They're not, anything else. So yeah, it could be quite a process to sort of land the job, for sure.
That's a good way for them to, if they really don't know it, if they really don't know what they want, that's like one of those like cop outs. They can go out to 5 people and they're like, shit, you know what? That one really sounds really good. We weren't even thinking about that.
Well, without naming names,
I bet that's
had that experience before. I bet. We're basically in both directions, right? But basically what they're doing is now they're getting a crowdsourced think tank of what the score should be for free, which is a part of that. So what started out as an earnest audition process has by some been sort of hijacked into this sort of like, oh, you know what? Since we don't want to do the thing of where we go through scores or go through music and put it in the edit bay and see what we like, let's just start crowdsourcing. Mm-hmm. We're going to say we're putting out the job and we're just going to get all these guys to write a bunch of music. And then, they may or may not pick the composer from that. I don't know. It's really interesting. It's an interesting thing. So I don't know what that looks like going forward. Of course, then there's also the conversation of AI too. At what point will that become? Because I'm sure if you feed it an AI model, every amazing score that's ever been produced over the last 70 years, and then asked it to kick out something, it could kick out something.
Yeah.
Would it win an Academy Award? Probably not, but it might get through you. It would get you through some B movies, probably.
Yeah, right? No, it could be something for
that'll change.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll change over. And composers don't have a union.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask you.
Like
really? Ah, shit.
We have no union. And from what I understand, they had tried back in the 70s a couple times. It didn't take. So yeah, so we actually, obviously we're experiencing all the same things that the writers and the actors have been saying. Of just like since everything went to streaming, the residuals, the royalties have just come to nothing. right? Like drop exponentially. But there's no union for composers. So then that becomes a problem. So the unfortunate thing there is I could see where for, obviously not for massive things, you'll still need artisan work for that. But some of the lower stuff, some of the stuff where guys, when they're young, they can cut when people are when they're young, they can cut their teeth on. Like, I'm going to do this silly little creature, whatever it is. Pretty soon, I think you might be able to, they'll start sort of creating AI cues out of that, sort of AI library cues.
Yeah.
So it's like, so I'm not sure what that'll look like. That'll be an interesting thing. And then will there be a composer that supervises that or not? Like, it'll be, so then what is the role of a composer going in the future will be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. And it's terrible that they don't give you guys money, because I know in acting, the old rule was, because I helped this actor, Larry Hankin, put together his memoirs. And he told me, like, when he auditioned for Seinfeld, they kept making him come back. And like, when they made him come back for like a sixth time, he's like, hey guys, I thought the limit was 5 and you guys got to start paying me. But they should make people, because I know writers obviously get paid when they're asked to do a treatment of scripts, but then you hear horror stories about that. It's like, oh yeah, they ended up not going with me, but they went with the other guy, but they used my idea for my treatment. So then they put your name in 100%. The credits. So I'm sure they do that with composers too. When you have like 4 or 5 people doing it, it's like, hey, we really like you a lot better than the weirdo guy, but we kind of like the weirdo guy score a little bit. So can you mesh his, it's like this.
Right. Can you just knock it off? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's obviously the other composer wouldn't get credit.
Oh no. With that, that's what I mean.
There's nobody to come out. Yeah. There's nobody to come after for that, because you can't really, and again, that is one of the shortcomings of music is in that dynamic, is that it's not very tactile. It's not very tangible. You can talk about it all day, but it's that whole dancing about architecture thing, right? So you have a script, you can read the script.
Yeah.
And looking at the page. Music, you have to listen to it and digest it, and it's so variable as to like how people process it. So it's all over the map. Yeah, man.
It is.
It's crazy.
So this has been so much fun. So some of the newer movies you have that people can check out, 57 Seconds is out there right now.
Yes, that's a Furst Brothers collaboration in a small way. My brother was a producer.
Oh, really?
And,
that's awesome.
And then my brother's a producer of that movie. It's his movie. And then him and director Rusty, who is a fantastic guy, great director, and was very kind and great with me. That was a really fun experience, and it's a great movie, and it's out now. And then the other one I did was Hidden Strike,
which is so
with Jackie
cool.
Chan and John Cena.
Yeah,
it's a fun little movie. Yeah, that one's a little bit of that one's got some tales of woe behind it. That's a harrowing tale.
Really?
To get done. I actually finished that. Yeah, I finished that movie in 2019 or 2020. Yeah. And
that movie's from that old, long ago? Ordeal. Really?
We finished it. Well, I finished it back then. And then I think some minor changes happened over the years, but that was a whole thing, that movie.
Wow. And with COVID
that was a whole thing. So sometimes,
yeah,
COVID, I'm sure knocked off. COVID, I'm sure created some scheduling conflict, issues for them.
I gotta watch. I gotta watch it because I like those two guys. I love Jackie Chan, and John Cena is one of those guys, like The Rock. I don't know. John Cena is pretty funny.
He's a funny guy. I will say this. Yeah, if you find John Cena funny, you'll enjoy the end credits for Hidden Strike, because I understand they left some of the outtakes there that they couldn't keep in the movie. But John Cena's ad-libs are fantastic. He seems like he's just a funny dude. I never met him, or Jackie Chan. But yeah, man, they're a lot of fun on screen. It's a silly movie, but it's cute. It's cute.
Yeah,
John Cena's always fantastic.
About John Cena, James Gunn said he's one of the best improvisers he's ever worked with. And James Gunn's obviously like, he's like a trauma guy, like his beginnings. So he's probably worked with so many people that are allowed to riff on camera to get scenes done in some cases. And he said he's like,
I'm willing to bet that.
He's
good. Because I was watching, if you watch the credits at the end of Hidden Strike, you'll see some of John Cena just riffing in the scene, right? But there was even more that's not on there that I saw from the dailies. That's just like, and it doesn't always make sense, but that's what's great is if the actor like John Cena isn't worried about it. He's just let's just try it. So like he seems to be one of those guys that just spits it out and just keeps going and keeps going. It's a lot of fun, man. And it's like, I think he was the Orton at first. He was the Randy Orton first to Dwayne Johnson, if I'm not mistaken. So like The Rock, right? Like Dwayne Johnson was like the big guy. And then John Cena was like the guy that would do the stuff in his wake, that The Rock would say no to kind of a thing. And then John Cena became his own guy. And now there's the other guys that will do stuff that are in the wake. So maybe that was like the model of WWE, to sort of have the Randy Orton sort of sitting in the wake. I don't know if that model still follows now, but
I don't even know if they do movies anymore. I think I don't even know if WWE Studios is around. They did a movie They did a movie a few years ago about one of the wrestlers, this girl Paige, who was from Australia, like her life story about being a fan and then eventually making it. I don't know if they do anything anymore, but John Cena, you can't take it away, dude. He's in every big movie. Like that, like for Netflix, that's probably, I don't know what the budget was. I'm sure it was pretty high, but for Hulu, he does like the Vacation Friends movies. They make 2 of those. He's in every Fast and Furious. Like
what was it Cock Blockers? I think I saw Cock
Blockers. That's a great movie.
So, did they change the name? Did they change the name?
Oh yeah, they did change. No, yeah, and the logo is Rooster. So it's Blockers with a big rooster behind it. Yeah. I
remember in production, in some of the production lists when they were still filming it. Yeah. You go to IMDb and you'll get some in production. It was called Cock Blockers for a minute. So in my head, that's what it's called.
But what he does in that movie, it makes him even cooler because I'm sure a lot of people, especially macho, big heavyweight champion wrestlers, I don't think The Rock would do the butt chug scene in that movie, which is ridiculous.
No, I think. I mean, at least I know for a while. I believe that Dwayne Johnson was trying to like do this sort of like the family branding. You know what I mean? Like,
I know.
But Cena, the butt chugging thing is great. Like, and Cena is, and man, that's the key. Somebody who's a muscular, good-looking dude is willing to just make an ass out of himself. Yep. It's like on camera. Just do whatever it takes to make it funny. It's like that's what's going to land.
Yeah, and he's going to work he's going to work a long time if he can have that part of him, because that's why some people, I think it's like, oh, you don't want to do that fun. Yeah, we don't know if we need you if you're not going to do like the silly, over the top, ridiculous thing. But no, that's awesome.
Yeah, you got to be willing to make fun of yourself. Yeah. Exactly. It's like, and I think he's just doing it in a more overt way than like say the Schwarzeneggers would do it, right? Because I think Schwarzenegger was meta too. With the one-liners and all that kind of stuff. Like, he was in on the joke. It's just that now, in 2023, the joke is now like what John Cena's doing, where you're not just being in on the joke that it's silly that you're the superhero guy or whatever, but now you're going to make an ass out of yourself. Or, big strong guy shoving stuff up his ass and whatever.
Yeah. Arnold did a whole movie making fun of himself. He did Last Action Hero, made fun of himself. Right. Like, that whole movie was making fun of him.
That's right.
Somehow they convinced, because him and Stallone didn't like each other, which is so funny. They have that rivalry. And then on Netflix, they both had documentaries come out. Arnold's came out like a month before. And I don't know if he has a book out, Stallone, but I know Arnold just had one out. But they had that rivalry. And in the documentary, he talks about how he tricked Stallone into doing Stop or My Mom Will Shoot.
Oh, is that right? He tricked him? How did he trick him?
Yeah, he lied and said that he wanted to do it. And there was this, I don't know if there's any movie ever that one did instead of the other, but I think that's probably the only one, because they made up, because in Last Action Hero, they're at the video store and it's Stallone dressed like the Terminator in a cardboard cutout. There's like these little
things, I don't even remember. That's great.
Yeah, dude. And even Stallone was meta too, because in Tango and Cash, he calls him like Rambo's a pussy. He says the line, Rambo's a pussy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Because the other guy said, God, I remember seeing that movie in the theater. That's how old I am, man. I went to a friend and saw that movie in the mall. At the mall, and hit with a friend. And I actually remember that line. He says something like, one guy says he thinks he's Rambo or something like that. And then his response is, nah, Rambo's a pussy. That's what it says.
Which is bizarre. Right.
So they started getting meta. Yeah. There's something I will say that's something that's like very like endearing about the big action movie thing, is that sort of like when it can go meta and it's like they're in on the joke too. It's like, dude, best.
No,
those are the best ones. That's why, I mean, even the first Expendables kind of made sense in that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was just like, okay, we're gonna round everybody up and show it off, before it got weird,
Yeah, no, it was really cool.
Old. Yeah.
Oh, I know. Once you do one,
man.
then it's like, who else can we add to this? And you're like, man, Chuck Norris is 76, and yeah,
I know. It starts to look like an AARP commercial. It starts to look like not what it's intended. You know what I mean? It starts to get crazy. So, but
this has been awesome, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man, it's been a pleasure.
It's cool. Yeah,
thanks for talking with me.
Both of the Furst brothers. That was cool, and sharing some stories about your dad and stuff. So now there's a lot of fun. This will be out in a few months, and I'll be sure to send you a link when it gets out there.
Yeah, man, just let me know, and if anytime, I'd be happy to talk about whatever. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun talking to people about movies who really like movies and aren't too caught up in the process of it.
Yeah,
it's in this town you get more. In this town, it can be hard to find somebody who's just a fan. Yeah, if you're talking to other people in LA, it could just in the business it could be hard because everybody's like, I'm dealing with whatever it is. So
and it's weird to talk about those stories. Like even when I helped Larry write his book, we connected just before COVID. I did one of these interviews when I first started, and after I asked him the second question about something in his career, he was like, "Hey man, I don't want to give all this away. I'm trying to write a book." And he's like, "Do you know anybody that does that?" And I had no idea. I just said yes. Kind of like what you mentioned, when people say, "Hey, what your dad taught you?" I go, "Yeah." So as soon as I got off the phone, I researched how do you do books? What's the way to do it? And then COVID hit. So every Saturday, which I don't know why the hell Larry had to do it on a Saturday, but it was every Saturday for 2 hours. I go through sections of his career and a lot of stuff he didn't remember. And he was like, it's so funny. You don't do this stuff. When you see a guy that you worked with on another movie, it's like, hey, how you been? It was like that. He's like, you never retell these stories. So it's so hard. So I was finding myself making these clips for Larry to watch beforehand because he wouldn't remember because it was so long ago. And a lot of times he was on 1 or 2 days on things. He remembered Friends because he was on Friends, as a sort of recurring character. Seinfeld was a big deal because it was important for him, but he had 200 credits, but it was cool for him to remember because he was in Escape from Alcatraz when he was really young. It was after he did doing a lot of comedy stuff. Somehow we got that role as being the third guy to Clint Eastwood in that movie. So he had some fucking wild stories about working with Clint.
That's wild.
Yeah. And he lived in San Francisco, which he was already up that way for a while because that's where he did improv. He was one of the first traveling theaters in a way, but no, it's fun.
Maybe that's how he got part of that job is they didn't have to pay his per diem or something.
Local. Yeah. But no, it's been fun, man. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for taking time out of it. And we'll talk soon.
My pleasure, guys. My pleasure. Yeah, man. Until next time.
All right, Nathan. Thanks, man. Can you believe, man, he was so much fun, but can you believe Howie Mandel did that? He paid Griff $20 to ruin a scene while they were filming scene elsewhere. Not cool, man. Not cool. But and also I kind of prefaced in the beginning, but isn't it wild the whole process of composers? They're all asking me hey, check this out and give us what you think the music could be. So I said to Nathan, because I've heard those stories when it comes to writers when they're submitting scripts, it's basically yeah, we really don't like your music, but we have music that we'd love for you to compose. And it could be somebody else's thing. It could be anything. They can get influenced by it. So it's kind of this odd. I wasn't expecting that. The director interviews, that makes sense. You go in and say, boom, boom, boom. But I guess the same thing can always happen in an interview. Even an actor interview. Somebody can go in, do a take a certain way, but they want the bigger name, but they say, hey, check this tape out. We want you to do it with this energy. So maybe it always happens. But man, I love talking to Nathan. And he opened the door. We'll talk to you again. It was just fun to just talk film because he's a film lover. Not saying everybody that I've interviewed doesn't love movies, but he seemed like he truly loves movies. Just the way we mentioned Butt Chug on the podcast. We were able to talk about John Cena in Blockers and that ridiculous scene that he could only do. So Cena, man, he is at the top of the wrestling actors. I know, The Rock might gross more because of the movies he's in, but it doesn't even come close. So again, thank you, Nathan, if you're listening. So your homework, 12 rounds 2, reload it. Andrew Powers is back in the saddle again. And the movie's like $2 or $3 to rent on Amazon or one of those. So I rented it on Prime. But so don't forget to review, rate, share our podcast, follow us on all social media at Sequels Only, and don't forget to check out our website, sequelsonly.com. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, guys.